This week's episode is sponsored by NVIDIA.
You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For 50 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at B&H.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Allan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. My name is Allan Weitz.
And I'm Jill Waterman.
And as you should know by now, our audio engineer, Mike Weinstein, will no doubt be adding his 2 cents to the conversation somewhere along the way. If there was a theme song for today's show, it would have to be All Things Must Pass from George Harrison's similarly titled 1970 LP. For the record, I personally prefer the remix version on the 50th anniversary edition of the record released in 2020. It's beautifully orchestrated, but that's just my take on it. We recorded the first episode of the B&H Photography Podcast on October 21st, 2015, just over 9 years ago. Since that time, I've hosted somewhere around 375 episodes and interviewed the who's who of the photography world, along with a generous sprinkling of actors and public figures who have, in one way or another, incorporated photography into their personal and/or professional lives. I even got the nicest hugs from both Shari Belafonte and Norman Reedus when they were on the show. And the best part? This show has been but one chapter in what I could only describe as being a truly charmed career. That said, today's show will mark the last time I'll be greeting you as the host of the B&H Photography Podcast. I'm going to save all of my thank yous to the end of today's show because without further ado, I think it would be a good idea to introduce the person who's going to be taking over as your host. His name is Derek Fahsbender. And if the name sounds familiar, it's because Derek appears regularly on the B&H website as producer and host of the B&H Event Space. He also appears at many industry events on behalf of B&H, as well as Fujifilm and Oberwerth camera bags, for which he serves as an ambassador. This is not the first time Derek and I have crossed paths. When the Leica Q2 monochrome was introduced, Derek and I took the camera for a test drive around Lower Manhattan, while a B&H video crew followed us around. I should also mention Derek is a pretty darn good street photographer. So the big question is, how's the kid gonna work out as a podcast host? Well, we're going to find out today when he goes up against his first guest. And pray tell, guess who's in the hot seat today? It's me. Derek, you have the keys. You're taller than me, so adjust the mirrors, adjust your seat, flip the ignition switch, and let's see where this puppy goes.
Well, the crash helmet and the seatbelt are on. Allan Weitz, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's nice to be here. This is exciting. Can you hear me?
How does it feel to be on the other side?
Very strange, although no different. You know, it's really funny. I was thinking about it. I think one of the challenges, and you're going to see this along the way, is that when you're interviewing somebody, it's so easy to want to jump in because say the person's talking about something and something similar happened to you, or you want to have a similar story. You're just dying to break in and tell your story, but you have to keep reminding yourself, no, shut up. You ain't the guest. You just ask the questions and just play a little bit. Today, I get to just yap. It's wonderful.
You've been waiting a decade.
Yeah, I've been keeping notes. I have 3 legal pads filled up with all the things I've been meaning to say for the past 9 so years. So anyway, where do you want to start this guy?
I've got an idea. We dug through the archives and found a 2018 Event Space talk that you and the original podcast crew gave. Let's give that a listen and take you back to where everything started.
I was the last one brought in, and I was brought in because they wanted a certain sound and voice in it, and I've got a big mouth and I'm a wise guy, and management knows it. Said, all right, throw them in there, let's see how they do. And I recently listened to the first 1 or 2 episodes that we did, and it was pretty bad. I was really kind of too embarrassed to even open my mouth half the time. But I quickly realized that, again, my voice and what I say and how I say it is really going to be what's driving the show. And it's not always what you say, but how you say it. Best way I can give you an example of it is when you're speaking in a situation like this. What sounds more interesting? Or you set up a rhythm, and you set up a tone, and you set up a pace, and you do that with your voice. And that's what I'm doing right now. And I learned to quickly play with my voice and use it as an instrument which is really what our voices are.
It's funny. I was listening to that, and I would say that I'd still stick to that summarization. I think I summed it up pretty well there about how I speak and how I use phrasing and pausing and changing the tone of my voice, just like that. The only thing I never really was able to stop doing, I reduced it a little bit, but not as well as I'd hoped to, is the use of
That's a hard one.
It's tough.
Yeah.
We all do it, but even just listening to some of these tapes, preparing for the show, I'm going, ooh.
When did you guys give that talk?
2018.
So it's 2.5 years thereabouts after the start of the podcast. I gotta say, you guys all came across as absolute professionals. You really exuded a sense of competency and authority and a sense of command of the art of radio broadcasting, which is sort of what this all is. I was really impressed.
Thank you. No, it's really funny. My mother never understood what the heck I did for a living. When you're in your 90s, a podcast, I basically explain, I do a radio show that you could listen to anytime you want. And that's the way I basically broke it down. But thank you. There was no ego in the studio. None.
Chemistry.
Yeah, the chemistry was just there. We had one goal, and that's what we wanted to do. And I again, even with you guys, you got something to say about the way I'm doing it? Just tell me about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the way you move ahead. That's the way, that's progress. That's the way you grow.
Allan, what came first? I mean, was it the idea that you wanted to do a podcast and then you kind of work on, okay, I need to come across with a personality. I have to have my catchphrases and I have to have my roll down. Or was it something that you had always wanted to be in broadcast and this was your chance to finally take that step?
This was totally out of the blue. This was not on my radar. But then again, being a writer was never on my radar. I always thought I had a knack for writing. But it wasn't until I wrote an article for, I think, Popular Photography on inkjet papers that all of a sudden I'm writing for 5 magazines. And that's how I got to B&H, because for a year and a half, Yossi Fogel from the sales one was tracking me down saying, we're starting a website. I want you there. And I wrote over 500 product reviews over the years before I went over to the podcast. But this was stone cold. I was called into our manager's office and he goes, I have a new project for you. And John and Todd Vernkamp were working on some preliminary podcast. They were playing around. It was their idea. I had nothing to do with it. And for some reason, when they would play the tapes to upper management, they didn't think there was enough electricity in it. And I was already known as a nuisance in the company. My reputation was there. When something went down, HR would immediately look for me to find out what the problem is and why I'm causing it. Anyway, they threw me in and it just worked. And I mean, I listened to the first few podcasts again, and I was terrible. I didn't know what to do. I really, really didn't. I felt the whole thing out. And then I started to treat it the way I treated my writing. I figured I wrote articles that I'd want to read. Mm. So I wrote in my voice because I like talking to myself. When I have something to say, I listen to myself. And I found that if I would just be myself behind the microphone the way I am sitting across the table from somebody, we're just schmoozing, that's the way to do it. And it's natural and it's fun. And again, the topic itself, photography, I've been taking pictures since 1966. I know cameras, I know photography. I've gone through the whole spiel, everything about it. So it was a nice blending of being able to just schmooze and talk about what I know about with people who know even more than I do about it.
One little detail about the show I particularly like is how you start things off with the single word greetings. How'd you come up with that?
Now, I know exactly where that came from. One of my assistants when I was shooting a lot was a fellow named Chris Bain, who went on to become the director of photography for Barnes & Noble. And he's a very good photographer in his own right. And whenever he'd get on the phone, he would just always go, greetings. And it just struck me. It's like, nobody says that. It's bright. It's cheery. It's a little bit European English, okay? And every time he said it, a little smile came onto me. And I decided, you know what? That's a nice way to start a show. So I started the show going, greetings, and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. And that's where it comes from. Chris Bain.
So simple.
Yep.
It's so powerful.
Yeah, talk about a hard act to follow. I mean, I'm sitting here, Allan, I got homework.
Just be yourself. That's what it all boils down to, okay? What works with you? When you're dealing with other people, what personas work best? What's the best chemistry? And just do that. It comes over.
Yeah, but here's the thing. When I listen to early episodes, the Allan that I get on episodes 1 through 150 are different than the Allan from episodes 300 to 375. There was an evolution of a persona that you can see etched out along those 8.5, 9 years at this point. Were you conscious of that?
No,
So that just happened.
just happened. The only thing I did consciously is that I do have a Kevlar costume that I wear when I'm recording now.
It was
That's
the
it.
costume.
Yeah, I had this
okay.
Kevlar costume designed. No, nothing conscious. No, it really, really isn't. And I'm not even aware of that. You just taught me something about what I've been doing here. I know early on I was stiff as a board and I loosened up, but I didn't know there were nothing that I can tell.
Right.
I'll take your word for it.
I think you've leaned into who you are. And I think when you're comfortable in who you are, you're just putting yourself out there, like you said, and that naturally comes across.
Totally. You know, some of my favorite moments, Allan, are when you flaunt your Brooklyn roots, like when we interviewed Steve Sasson. We've got some clips from that episode. Let's give them a listen.
You know, I think it's worth sharing with the world out there that we are both Brooklyn boys, born within a year of each other. So we have a deep bond here.
But that was just the start of the connection between you and Steve, as he noted a few minutes into the show when describing the first digital camera he created for Kodak.
I had created an electronic version of an image. So I had a camera here. And so if I could just come up with a more permanent form of storage for this, which turned out to be a digital cassette, I would have what I called an electronic still camera. And then it occurred to me if I could build this camera with no moving parts. And that was strictly the Brooklyn in me, and you'll appreciate this, Allan. I wanted to annoy the mechanical engineers, which had a dominant position in the laboratory. I thought if I could build something with no moving parts, that would really get their attention. So I had no idea how to go about doing all this, but I decided this was a worthy thing to do because I was brought up in the 60s like you were, and I watched Star Trek, and I'm convinced all good ideas come from Star Trek. And you know, you never saw paper or film on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. You know, everything was electronic. Everything was instantly transmitted with lights and things. And so I thought if we could do photography without consuming anything, the only thing I would consume in taking a picture and displaying it would be a few joules of energy rather than a bunch of materials and chemicals, that would be an interesting way to look at photography and maybe a futuristic way to look at it. And so that was kind of my motivating factor for seeing if I could go and do this. Now, of course, nobody told me to do it. Nobody really spent a lot of time asking me what I was doing. So I had the freedom to experiment and to fail many times in the year or so it took me to build.
Then, after several minutes of describing his assembly process in detail, Steve picked back up on your shared Brooklyn roots.
So this goes to a point that I think I should make, and that I stole most of the stuff I used to build this. This was not authorized by anybody. This was just a project to keep me out of trouble before something useful came along. Now, Allan, you'll remember this. In Brooklyn, everybody used to throw away their old TVs and radios.
Absolutely.
And I used to go around all the time and pick these things up, drag them back to the house, and then do an autopsy on them, pull out all the capacitors, resistors, transformers, and then I would leave these carcasses in my alleyway in the back. And that was a kind of an annoyance to the neighbors. But
we did that with cars, by the way.
Yeah, cars too.
That's just between us. I don't know about anywhere else in the world, but in Brooklyn, when we were growing up, because he and I are about the same age, you walk down the street and there's always discarded television sets and things like that. And that's what he would basically drag back into the house to take apart and, use as pieces and parts like that. I would do the same thing. My father's a mechanic. I would take apart, he'd give me carburetors, take them apart and try to reassemble them into other things.
So when it comes to your hosting skills, you've sometimes described yourself using the word Tummler. Where did that name come from?
A Tummler is a Yiddish phrase, and it's nothing new. Court jesters were essentially Tummlers. And it was important then because there was no social media, no TV, no radio, no podcast. So the king had to be entertained. And that's what a jester would do. And the jester had a very, very unique position within the social structure, is that the jester is one of the few people, maybe aside from the queen, and even that's not a rule, who could jest the king and not get his head cut off, because that's his job. He had to know where the lines were, but a jester can get away with more in front of the king than anybody else could, and that was his job to do that. And that's what a Tummler is. If you ever went to a hotel or resort, the guy who played Simon Says by the pool, he's a Tummler. Howard Stern is a Tummler. And that's just a word. It's somebody who could basically keep things lubricated and moving along.
You were familiar with that term. When did you first connect it to your skills?
I just heard the term, I think it was even after I was doing the podcast. I didn't know it all the time, but it's just a term that I had heard, and I think it was being used to describe Howard Stern, actually. And I realized, well, that's kind of what I do, in a way. Even when I write, half of what I wrote about had nothing to do with the product. It was an excuse to drop jokes, and I got away with it a lot. So that's really the basis of it. And I think anybody who's in a host position is essentially a Tummler in one form or another.
The person that comes to mind is Mel Brooks at the Catskills.
Yeah.
Like an MC.
Exactly. An MC is a Tummler.
Yeah.
Anybody who had a variety show, except for Ed Sullivan, is a Tummler. All right? He was a corpse.
But like the guy in between the acts.
Exactly. Yeah. Including the guy with the broom who cleaned up after the elephant. They were all Tummlers. So that's really what it is. It's just somebody who can get up there and just keep the ball rolling, and keep people happy. That's really what it is. Because people going out to a hotel, to dinner, or to a show, you want to be entertained. And that's what it is. Somebody who can keep things moving along.
Yeah. Well, then there's always the references to gear that come up on the show. And you were really great prompting guests to say interesting things about the gear they worked with or, favorite things. One of the shows that you really enjoyed was the interview that you guys did with Bellamy Hunt, the Japan camera hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Are you the person that knew about this guy?
I've been following his stuff, and I like the way he did it. There's a lot of people out there who talk about classic, but he's got a funny persona about him. He's an Englishman who moved to Japan. I think he married a Japanese girl. He's got the kids and everything. And you have to admire a guy that one of the first things he does when he gets to Japan is he has the tattoo of what's that mafia group in Japan? What are they called?
The Yakuza.
Yakuza, yeah. He had a tattoo put on his arm, and you don't do that in Japan.
Wow.
All right? So, so automatically I like the guy. All right. He's got spunk. But he's got a great knowledge base of gear. He knows how to market. He's brilliant for marketing. People are buying all this crap with his initials on it. It's wonderful. Anyway, I wanted to have him as a show. We agreed that it would be fun to have him on. And I figured we'll just talk with him, on a phone hookup online. And when I reached out to him, he goes, yeah, I said, I'm going to be in New York next week. I go, really? Could you come in on Monday? Yeah. So it was really funny. So I made a phone call. Within a week, he was in the studio.
Wow.
So we just perfectly lucked out on that. And of course, I loaded up all of my classic cameras into a Halliburton case and hauled them in. And during the course of the show, opened it up and he goes, oh my God. So it made his trip worthwhile.
By the way, what did he do to support himself? What was his line of work?
I don't know how he started, but he started selling like little things like 35 and 120 millimeter film containers to hold rolls of film, little accessories if you were a film shooter that people were buying in bright colors. But he gets involved with a lot of things, and he also buys and sells cameras, classic ones. And he knows his stuff.
Yeah. And there's a great clip of you talking with him about the one camera he'll never sell.
That's a Leica vid on the bottom, right?
Actually, it's a Leica MP6.
MP6.
So it was the one that was made prior to the MP becoming a regular item. It was made as a sort of a test model for the market in Japan only. With the Leica vid and the winder and the black paint 35 Summicron aspherical with the hood, it took me like 4 years to put that set together. So
I'll give you $500 cash right. Small bills. Small bills.
Oh, I'm tempted.
And a Metro card.
Oh, you really know how to up the ante. I think I might pass. That's my. You'd have to prize that from my cold dead hands, I guess.
I think one of the best conversations we had at that point in time, I was into collecting the earliest Nikon Fs, the ones that start with serial number 640. And you get down to some of the initial batches, and there are funny little things about them that are unique to those particular cameras. And he revealed to me that there are people that actually forge these things, which blew me away. They're actually forging Nikon Fs so they can get more money for them. But one of my big takeaways that he was very honest, even though he's into buying and selling. He said that you're never going to become rich collecting cameras. He goes, you enjoy them, and that's about it. But very few cameras actually increase in value over time. And you have selects like Hasselblad Superwides and Leica cameras. He goes, but the other ones really don't gather value. And since that show, which is quite a while now, I've been collecting, and he's absolutely right. There are some cameras I had in my collection that really haven't gone anywhere, yet I have some Leicas that have tripled in value over the course of 4 or 5 years. So that was my takeaway. Yeah, so you might, like them, love them, but don't fall in love with them, and keep one. I'm down to keeping 5 so far, so I'm working on it. I keep going to the group every week to Camera Collectors Anonymous and talk about it. My name is Allan, and I have too many cameras.
Do you really have 5 or 6 Leicas
I have
still?
2 M4s in mint shape, one from 1974, black, not a mark on it, a 69 chrome without a mark on it, and I have an MP hammer tone. And I picked that up at B&H. It was priced fairly. And that camera's tripled in value since I got it. And I have other cameras I bought, including another MP I bought with blue leather on it. I paid $2,700 for it, which I thought was a steal. And 3 years later, I sold it for $6,000.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm taking all the money I made doing the podcast. I'm just going to buy Leicas and sell them.
There you go.
Which is the one we'd have to pry from your cold dead hands, though?
My Hasselblad Superwide.
Why?
It is the most perfect camera ever made.
When you say perfect camera, what is a perfect camera to you?
The lens is extraordinary. It has a 38 millimeter f4.5 Biogon that was designed in the mid 1940s. And it was the widest angle medium format lens. It's the equivalent of a 21 millimeter lens. It's a 90-degree diagonal angle of view in a square format. The problem with it is that it was so wide, it couldn't be used on any of the existing Hasselblad was the original SLR. It was the 1600 before the 500 came out. And even with the 500, you couldn't put the lens on it because it would stick too far into the body. So what they did was they created a new body that's only an inch thick. It's essentially just a wedge that the lens was put on, and then you put a 120 back on it, and then you sit a viewfinder on top that gives you what you're going to be photographing. So the camera is as manual as it gets. No batteries, no meter. You have to guess your focus. You have to aim the viewfinder to frame it. And everything is manual and has to be thought out. But if you do everything right, you have an extraordinarily sharp image with incredible tonality, with an ultra-wide angle lens that has zero distortion. You could use the super wide as a copy camera and get perfect results from it. So it's extraordinary. And I also think one of the cool things, they didn't make many of them. The one I have is a black from 1979. I think they made about 700 of them, so they're rare, and this one is really mint. What's really cool is that if you ordered a super wide anytime in the 70s and 80s, there's an excellent chance that the camera you own was assembled by a woman named Florence, whose job was, she was in the Hasselblad factory in Sweden, and she would unpack the Zeiss lenses from Germany and put them on together with the bodies and the backs that were made in Sweden. So you bought cameras that were finally hand-assembled and signed off by Florence. You heard that here. But anyway, that camera, it fits beautifully in my hand. The pictures I've gotten with it always are just different.
Now, notice he didn't say a digital camera.
Oh.
Went right back to the film days. I mean, you were an early adopter of digital.
Well, there's more to that story. I think there's something about a write-up for a very early Nikon camera, if I have my notes correctly here.
Oh, yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah, I got a call from Mike McNamara, the editor of Popular Photography. He goes, I have a project for you that I can't do. It's a conflict of interest, but I think it'll be perfect for it. And he put me in touch with K&L Advertising in Tokyo, which was Nikon's global advertising agency. And they were about to come out with the D100, which was their first full-frame digital camera. And that was going to be a big deal. Because everything else before that was APS-C. And they go, when are you coming out with a full-frame camera? And they go, oh, APS-C is full-frame. You can see all 4 corners. That was, seriously, that was the selling line, which is great. Anyway, they came out with this, and he said, listen, we have this camera, we have to write it, but we don't really understand what this is about. Can you help us? So if you ever find a Nikon D100 brochure, it was like an 8-page brochure, I wrote pretty much all of it. And over the years, I've been working on projects with Nikon through their agency on various things as they've grown. They've gotten better at it. They don't need me that much anymore. But initially, they said, we understand cameras and all this, but how do we sell this? And I basically had to go in and explain a lot of this stuff in a way that was, easily digestible. So again, I wrote the way I'd want to read it because I can't understand a lot of technical stuff. I got to boil it down to the basics and then put it back together. And that's what I did.
So were Nikon cameras the early brand that you worked with?
No, actually. I was Nikon in the film years, FM2s and F3s. I swore by those cameras. They were amazing. Those were my battle cameras when I was shooting 35. I went to, actually, yes and no for Nikon, because I was shooting with a Fujifilm S1 and then an S2, which was essentially a Nikon camera because Fuji didn't have their own cameras then. So what they did was they modified and rebadged Nikon cameras. So that's what I used early on. And those were 6.3 APS-C cameras. And then I got a Canon 5D. It was my first full frame. Canon's great cameras. I was never comfortable with them though. In my hand, the menus, there was something about it that never quite clicked for me personally. And I went from there to Sony. And even though I have my bitches and moans with that, that's pretty much the camera I use now for a majority of my work, a lot of my work, my color work. And I'm also in a love affair with a Leica M10 monochrome, which I bought when they first came out, which I still use, I still love. And there are times I go out shooting black and white with my Sony in color and convert. I could tell you right now that when I'm out with my M camera, there are times I just want to use that one. It's nice to have choice. Okay, I'm spoiled. What can I say? And I earned the right to be. But I still get an amazing kick out of the fact that when I'm out there, there are times I'll put on the EVF, the electronic finder, and use the camera like an SLR. Okay, especially if I have a close-up lens on it, because Leica M's don't focus close. So I do focus close. So I use a lot of lenses and adapters to do things that the camera normally would not do. But when I'm just out with a 15 millimeter lens, just doing casual pictures, I still get a total charge out of the fact that I'm shooting a digital camera that I could set shutter speeds and f-stops manually and focus through an optical rangefinder system, the same exact rangefinder system that was designed in 1954. That's what, 70 years ago? In a brand new camera.
Yeah.
And I could put lenses made in 1954 on this thing that have a different look.
Yeah.
That to me is one of the beauties of that camera. Okay. It really, really is. It ain't the red dot. In fact, the camera doesn't even have a red dot. And if it did, I'd probably put a piece of black tape on it. But to be able to use a purely analog piece of technology in the digital age is a kick and a half.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at the image it produces, and it is remarkably similar to the 4x5 Tri-X I used to shoot back in the 60s.
Yeah. I didn't understand the whole Leica thing until I borrowed that M camera for a week from a friend. And I was finally like, okay, I get what they're doing here. They're just saying, basically, sorry, Charlie, you can have that digital negative, but you're going to have to acquire it old school.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, guys. I don't want to be the one that breaks up the Leica party here, but I'm kind of interested in that first marketing brochure that you wrote for Nikon. How does McNamara get your number? How do you become connected to him? How did this whole thing come about?
Well, part of the things of freelancing is that you have to hustle yourself. And when I wasn't showing my portfolio photography, I would just stand out in the corner of Madison Avenue and 38th Street handing out little tags of paper saying, you need something written, you need something written, you need something written, you need something written. I'm cheap. No. It's a very good question. I don't remember how Mike got my...
Weren't you published in Popular Photography?
No, excuse me. Yeah, I wrote an article on inkjet paper that's what it was. Yes. We talked about this in the Graham Nash show. When Epson came out with printers, I fell in love with them, and I used to just jam any kind of paper I could through these things to see how it worked, including a lot of watercolor papers, because inkjet papers, for the most part, were just gloss, semi-gloss, and matte. So I used to play around a lot, and then they started to come out with new papers, and I wrote a complete review of all the papers, or some of the major papers that are out there for popular photography. And then I started to write a monthly column for them. And then I started working for Picture Magazine. I was working for about 3 or 4 other publications. ProPhoto was hiring me to do a lot of their work for their sales and promotional and a lot of their manuals. So I just started doing this stuff. So I got myself a good name in the industry writing about technology. So this was a way of me applying my photo skills. And it was also nice to be able to round out my income a little bit, because being a freelance isn't always guaranteed. That's how that came about. And then through Mike, when he got this inquiry from K&L, to him, it was a conflict of interest. He couldn't do it because there was an advertiser and they were there. So he did the smart thing. He handed it off and he goes, "You're not attached to anybody. You can do it." So that's how that came about.
Interesting. So you're freelancing. You're now writing copy for brands because you know better than the brand, right?
Yep.
How do you end up at B&H? And if we can, let's talk a little bit about, because I think the culture of B&H when you began, it was a different landscape.
Oh
B&H
my God,
was
it was
a landing spot. You had people that were top people in their industry.
Yes.
Landing at B&H, and you could go to the store, you could go over to the cubicle farm and find someone who had a really impressive resume that was kind of just flying under the radar.
Yeah. No, we had some amazing people back in the early. We still do. I shouldn't. We still do. But back then, there were a lot of pros filling in their paychecks there. Now, I didn't come directly from photography and writing to that. I started shooting 1970-ish. Started actually working full time as a photographer, and had a lot of little gigs, mostly freelance. I did some teaching at a local college as well as Moore College of Art in Philadelphia for a few years just to supplement my income. And I was doing a lot of work for magazines, a lot of yachting magazines, New York Magazine, Philadelphia, New Jersey Monthly, Fortune, all the boating publications. And honestly, it was getting a little bit old. And the day rates were not going up. When I started, an average day rate would be $400 to $500, which was manageable. But 10 years later, when it doesn't go up, it's not as manageable. And I can tell you right now, you're lucky if you get $500 a day from a magazine in many cases right now. So I don't know how people even exist that way. So I was getting to a point where it was getting a little bit hard. And then I had a tax audit. And being a creative type, one is not usually terribly good in business, and my records were terrible, and they got me up the kazootie, okay? And honestly, I'm being real straight right now, it put my head into a tailspin, and I really couldn't think very creatively for a while. And I did the smartest thing I'd done in a while at that point. I got myself a job at a local deli behind the counter. For 1 year, I sliced roast beef, I slung coleslaw. I did all kinds of deli prep, sandwiches and stuff. I had a blast.
Wow.
I had fun. A lot of what you hear on the show, I built there dealing with crazy people trying to buy coleslaw. All right. I had a lot of fun. And then I wanted to get back into the game. And I had a friend at a place called Lens and Repro, which was on 17th Street. And it was a camera shop that did repairs and rentals. And I got a job there, and I worked there for a few months and then flipped over to a place which I really like called PhotoCare, which is still in existence. They're on West 22nd Street. And I worked at PhotoCare for a gentleman named Jeff Hirsch, God bless him, for 12 years. And over that time, PhotoCare, 85% of their customers are working pros, the people whose work we all talk about. I mean, I've had a lot of guests on the show who I used to sell gear to, and I knew them from there. It was the who's who of photography and a lot of celebrities. Okay, I sold Robin Williams a computer bag. I had a blast for 45 minutes. Wonderful man. But met a lot of people there. But more importantly, because I was dealing with professionals, I had to know my shit. These are people whose lives and income depends on my advice. It was great. I had to learn gear. I had to know it inside and out. And I grew more as a photographer working at PhotoCare than I did in 25 years with a camera in my hand. So from there, that's what gave me my ability to start writing intelligently. I was able to explain things to people over a counter. That's the beauty of sales. You learn to talk to people, okay? And half the time, you're not even talking about the gear. You're just talking. You're engaging with people, which is what we're doing right now. So that built up what I had there. And then Jesse Fogel from B&H seen my work. He knew what I was doing. And he was chasing me now for a year and a half saying, I want you to work for us. I want you to work for us. And finally I said, you know what the hell? And I made the switch. So I went from photography to sales of photo gear to writing about photo gear. And I wrote the original manual for the B&H website. It was about 42 pages long. And somebody was finally honest with me. He says, Al, it's a great book, but it's only about 4 pages. The rest of it is just your jokes. And it was true. I just wrote a manuscript. It was a great thing. It should be a play sometime. So
Hold on. What the heck are you talking about? You wrote a manuscript,
a manual for how to write for the internet.
Oh my gosh.
Now, obviously, I had no idea.
Right.
I just started writing for the internet. So I did a little bit of research, and then I just started writing how I think you should do it. It was the beginning. So I just said, this is what I think you should be doing. Okay? And basically, it was the same thing I've been telling you all along here today. Talk to the person.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to them. This is a person. And don't assume that you know why they're buying this, because you don't. All right, it's true. I know people that would buy 1 gig micro drives when they first came out because they were cheaper than iPods, and they would basically hack them and use them as iPods. It was the same guts.
So what year were you working at the deli, and where was that within the time frame of the film to digital transition?
Before. That's all before. Digital happened while I was at PhotoCare. And I remember we actually had the very first Leica digital camera, which was the S1, which was this scan camera that was about 10 by 10 inches by 2 inches thick with wings on the side that you used as handles. And it had a Nikon lens mount on it, or a Leica R mount that you'd put your lenses on, and then you'd put a scan back on it and take amazingly sharp pictures. But it took 5 minutes to take a photograph because it was a scan back, high resolution scan back. Then I went up to Kodak for their original digital trainings when they came out with their original cameras, which were based on Canon and Nikon. And all of the other ones. So I got factory trainings from a lot of the manufacturers early on, which gave me my understanding. And we were all learning together at that point. It's like none of us really knew what was going on. And it was the Wild West. I mean, forget about standardization. It was like an orchestra being led without a conductor back then. New software came out. Didn't mean it worked with anything else we were using. So it was pretty crazy back then. I remember when Photoshop only had 1 backup and 1 save.
Wow.
You can go back 1 time, and that was it.
I'm interested how this affected your photography. I mean, it's a photo adjacent job, which it checks the box. You're working in photography, but you're not a photographer at this point. I mean, you have a full-time job with benefits, which is comforting. Does this open your photography and your creativity up?
Yeah, because pretty much every week I'd have a new camera. I'd show up from lunch and there'd be cameras on my desk. We want you to review these. I would just go out and take pictures. I had the best job in the world for the longest time. People would give me cameras and go take pictures and write about it. Come on, I had my ass in a tub of butter. Are you serious? That's fun. That's fun. Okay? Seriously. People say, what do you do for a living? I go, you won't believe what I do for a living. And people are paying me to go out and take pictures with cameras and write about it. Seriously. And I never took that for granted. And the same thing with this podcast. All right? I mean, how many people have an opportunity to do what we're doing right now? All right? And get paid for it.
Yeah.
I was at the gym this morning, and I have an old T-shirt that says, ask me about podcasting. And as I'm walking to the lot, some old woman goes, oh, I was going to tell you that this is my son's podcast. And she has some name of some podcast on her T-shirt. He goes, he just got his first sponsor. And I was saying, good for him. And I'm saying to myself, I never had to hustle for a sponsor. That was the beauty of it also. All right?
Yeah.
And speaking of sponsors, my coffee cup is a little empty, Jill. I think this would be a great time to go to a break.
I agree. When we come back, we'll have more with Allan Weitz, and we'll dive into his professional photography career. Stay tuned.
Upgrade to advanced AI with NVIDIA GeForce RTX GPUs and supercharge everything you do. Play graphically demanding games at higher frame rates, render 3D and video content faster, and work smarter with productivity-enhancing generative AI assistants and AI-powered apps. Plus, with incredible on-device AI performance powered by dedicated NVIDIA AI processors, your data stays secure on your PC. NVIDIA powers the world's AI, and with RTX GPUs and Windows PCs, it also powers yours. Head on over to B&H.com for more information about NVIDIA products, or use the link in our podcast show notes.
Welcome back to the conversation, everyone. Before the break, we were talking with longtime B&H Photography Podcast host Allan Weitz about his time working at B&H. But I want to go back prior to the B&H days, to when the really good stories happened, when you were working on assignment.
Define good.
All right, we're looking for a new adjective here. Let's dig right to the bottom of the bucket. I want to know, what's the weirdest photo assignment you've had in your career?
Weirdest assignment. There is one that comes to mind, and I actually walked out on it. It's the only assignment I ever walked out on. It was for New Jersey Monthly, and it was to do an article on one of the people that see spirits and stuff like that. There's a name for these people.
Medium?
Yeah, okay. And they wanted to do an article on it. Okay, And I went along, and I was with her for about an hour and a half, and finally I said, "This is bullshit." And I said, "What are you, nuts?" I don't remember this story, but it's like I really couldn't take it, and there was nothing I couldn't take. And I actually, I'm going home, and I went, and this is pre-cell phone, so I went home and I called up the art director who I had a great relationship. Says, "I can't do this." And he said, "What do you mean? No, he gave me this to do it." I said, "No, I'm not doing this. Please give this to somebody else. I can't even fake this one. I don't believe this assignment. I'm not doing it." Now, honestly, it's kind of funny to do that, and I've done a lot of things like that where I kick myself. I really should have done something. That was not professional. All right. So you think about the weirdest thing. It was the weirdest thing, but honestly, and it's kind of funny to talk about right now, but that was not a professional thing to do. Even if I just did a portrait of this person in one of the environments, I would have fulfilled the assignment.
Was she sitting there doing a seance or something?
Yeah, I don't remember the detail. This is a while back. This got to be like 30 years ago. But it was like, and I'm listening to it, and like I realized this isn't going anywhere. She was babbling and stuff like that, and like I'm not seeing anything.
Speaking in tongues.
Yeah, it's like make the lights go on and off. Do something. Rattle something. Expose my film. I don't know. But nothing was happening, and for some reason, I don't know where my head was at. I just go, I can't buy this crap, and I just left. So again, totally unprofessional, and I would never, ever, ever do that again. Nor would I recommend you do that again, because the idea of a job is you're only as good as your last job. Okay? They like what you did, they'll call you again. They don't like what you did, they're not calling you again. All right?
Did the art director have sympathy for your predicament?
I don't remember, but I did work for them after that.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, one person who did call me up, I never heard from them again. I think it was Vanity Fair. They called me, and I totally blew an assignment. They needed, I'm being honest here. I'm really being honest. This is very therapeutic. They wanted an aerial shot of a very extravagant home somewhere in Westchester or something like that. They required, renting a helicopter and the whole thing.
Wow.
And I didn't do this is pre-Google Maps and everything else. This is where you still went to the gas station and they gave you a map that you unfolded in your car. And I didn't do my prop, and I thought I nailed where this place was because it's a pretty open area. And I went up and I did a whole photo shoot of this place from the air for the magazine. It was the wrong house.
Oh my God.
Oh, man.
All right. Wrong house. I did not do my homework. I should have gone in my car and driven there, even if it took me a day of my life to make sure I had the right place. I was too lazy to go in and do the extra effort to make sure that I knew what I was doing. I was cocky enough to say, I know where this is. I see where it's in there. And I didn't.
Wow. And you thought you got the right house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was proud of myself. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Real proud.
But you got a call back.
Oh, they called me back, all right.
They called you back.
Yeah. I can't repeat what they said to me. But,
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your line to the local helicopter pilots, was that a special hotline? Were you able to book a helicopter really quickly because they knew that?
Oh, yeah. It's not hard getting a helicopter. They're all over the place. You pick up a phone, you can get them, yeah.
And that's taken care of. I mean, that's paid for by the production?
They took care of that, luckily.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't submit that bill. They made the arrangements for the helicopter, but it was not unusual for me to do the same. Most of the helicopters I used were for the boating magazines. I would use them regularly. And if I was shooting in the New Jersey area, I had one pilot who I used religiously for the reason being that he was shot down 18 times in Vietnam. And I figured, this is my boy. He walked away 18 times. He's my man. He could make that helicopter dance, go backwards, float around. He could do anything. And it was great. I mean, we barely had to speak. He knew what I needed, and he would go out and do it. So I'd work with those guys a lot. And down in Florida, they're a dime a dozen when we shoot down there. Anywhere, any major city has helicopters. And again, they're pricey, but I always joke about it as being the best tripod made.
Right.
Yeah.
Whenever somebody says to me, "What's your favorite tripod?" I go, "A Bell Jet Ranger."
Right.
You mentioned all the work you did with yachting photography. How did you get into that? I don't really picture you as somebody that grew up on boats.
You're absolutely correct. I had no business photographing boats in a certain respect. I got into boats again by accident. I started off early on when I was still in school. I would go through trade magazines. I would go through annual publications from like the Art Directors Club, all of these graphic art societies. And I would look for graphic designers and art directors whose work I liked. And those are the people I would put phone calls to. And back then you could actually get to meet these people and show your portfolio. And again, I was still in high school when I was doing this. And one of the people whose work I kept seeing, who I really loved, was a fellow named Marty Pedersen, B. Martin Pedersen, who, God bless him, is still alive. He's, I think, 85 now, and he's the publisher of Graphi's Publications. He's still working. And I went up to see him because he put out a magazine called Pastimes, which was the Eastern Airlines in-house magazine that you read when you're on the plane. And I went to show him a portfolio, and I walked out with my first assignment after a cold call. He gave me an assignment to photograph. He said, I need 3 pictures of all 5 boroughs for an article we're doing on New York City. You have 2 weeks. And that was it. So I just drove around photographing things in New York City, all 5 boroughs. And while I was there, he had these giant proof sheets up on the wall of a cover and opening pages of a magazine called Nautical Quarterly, which was this very posh-looking square publication in a slipcase that him and 2 other people were essentially designing and publishing on. They cashed out their credit cards to get the first issue out. And I said, what's this? And he was talking about it. And we're talking about boats. And he said, you have any experience with boats? I go, yeah, I used to go fishing in Sheepshead Bay. That's about it. And it's a funny thing. I always joke around that it was a perfect marriage because they had no money and I knew nothing about boats, but he liked the way I took pictures. And the pictures I'm showing him are photographs of old buildings in Coney Island. So go make a connection. He saw something in my work of architecture and he goes, I want you to photograph boats for me. And I remember the first time I did it, I had a brand new 18 millimeter lens and I shot a lot of stuff with an 18 millimeter. He beat the shit out of me for that. He says, I'm asking you to photograph a piece of sculpture and you're reinterpreting it. Talk about life lessons. And I learned to use a wide angle lens creatively and correctly. Yes, you can shoot a boat with a 25 millimeter lens or an 18 millimeter lens if you know what you're doing and you know where to position it and position yourself. So that was a huge experience. And Marty did not tolerate crap. I learned a very important lesson from Marty because I'd always show him my work. And he goes, I'm going to tell you something right now. Everybody you're showing your work to, and I know who you show your work to, you're doing to the right people, but these are people who see photographs every day. They know what a good photograph is. And when you go to show them your portfolio, they're expecting you to show you their very best work. But they're also looking for the weakest piece in your portfolio because that shows how willing you are to go away from absolutely great to good enough for the job. So they want to see where you're willing to draw the line as far as quality. You want to talk about a good lesson?
Yeah.
Okay. So anybody out there who's listening, you want to have a good portfolio. You are better having 12 really strong pictures as opposed to 12 really strong pictures and 6 or 8 fillers that are okay, but not quite good enough because you're being judged on that too.
Well, and that was a time where you had to know your craft. You had to be at the top of your game.
Thank you.
Photographers are a dime a dozen now. So yes, it's more crowded, but you're standing among a lot of mediocrity. And back then, it wasn't the case. So, I mean, what taught you to really set yourself apart? Because I think you have carved a niche for yourself, and you had to in that day, or you weren't working.
I had to eat. I have kids that are hungry. It's amazing what children do to you. It's amazing. I don't know. I always had a love of photography. I really, really did. I was terrible in school. I'm slightly dyslexic, but I learned photography on a 4x5 view camera. And if you've never used a view camera before, it's very interesting because when you're composing your picture, you're looking at the image upside down and backwards under dim light. You're forced to look at composition. And you're forced to think not subjectively, but objectively, because what you're looking at is not a recognizable object. Whereas you feel flipping around, suddenly you're engaged with the subject, whereas now you're just composing it and focusing on it. So there's a lot of that goes into it as well. So I have a love of photography. All right. It's something that clicked with me. It worked early on. I was getting positive responses from people. It's nice getting pats on your back and getting, people paying you to do all that stuff. It was a passion that I had to do because honestly, I never wanted to have an office job. There were very few other jobs aside from working in a deli that I really would enjoy doing on a regular basis. There was something about being a photographer that I absolutely loved. It was frightening at times. I was freelance for 85% of the time I've been working. And I never really knew where my next check was coming from. And there's a certain exhilaration about that too. And that forces you to keep on your game. It really, really does. And when I switched careers, it was because I realized I was getting to a point where this is getting old. As much fun as I had shooting boats and as much exposure as I got, at some point in time, you have to really enjoy what you're doing. And I've been fortunate that each time and juncture of my life when it starts getting a little bit old, maybe, something new comes around that's like, oh, I never did this before. Now I'm writing. Oh, wow, podcasting? I always wanted to do a radio show. And kind of now I have the same thing going on right now. I'm saying, ooh, what am I going to be doing now to fill up my time?
The art of reinvention can't be understated.
As I like saying, I don't want my paint to dry.
Look, the landscape of photography is so much different than it was back in the 80s. I was born in 81. I wasn't working in the 80s. So what was it like for a working photographer in the 80s?
It was a lot easier.
In what way?
Well, you actually touched upon it, and that photography used to be an art and a craft. You asked me what my favorite camera. I said the Hasselblad Superwide. Why? Because if the picture comes out, it's because I knew what I was doing, and I did everything right. When I started out, I was fortunate that I went to the School of Visual Arts and the High School of Art and Design, both in Manhattan. And when I was still in high school, the school was located on 2nd Avenue and 57th Street in Midtown Manhattan. And literally 4 blocks away was Carnegie Hall. And above Carnegie Hall are a bunch of studios that housed many of the best photographers of the day, including Art Kane. Who else?
Bill Cunningham.
Bill Cunningham was there. That's right. He was in there also. About a good half a dozen photographers. And I would go after school and knock on their doors and say, hi, my name is Allan Weitz. I go to High School of Art and Design on the street. Can I show you my pictures? And they would invite me in. And I established relationships with these people. And I would call these people up. And quite often they would answer their own phones. And I'd go up and talk to them. Now, many of them had drop-off policies, which became more and more common as time went on. These people are working they don't have time to sit and look at pictures and pat you on the back. And then when they did, you said, thank you. That was a big deal. That's very rare these days that someone takes the time. So I would go around and just sort of find who I like, who does the kind of work that I would want to do, and I would call on them. And I was fortunate that people like Marty Pedersen would look at my pictures of Coney Island and go, I like the way he composes a picture. I think he could shoot boats. Now, as a direct offshoot of that, I get a call from an agent in Chicago after about 3 years at Nautical Quarterly. And he has a project for me to photograph an annual report for a company called Parker Hannifin, which is still around. Parker Hannifin does everything from brake linings for jets to food service for Air France and British Air to building dry dock. They're into everything in the planet. And Mr. Parker, the boss, is into yachting, and he likes your pictures, and he wants to know if you could photograph his next annual report. And I traveled the world photographing oil rigs and ships being built and the Boeing factory in Seattle, and got paid very nicely for that. Why? Because I took good pictures of boats. And why did I take good pictures of boats? Because the guy who was doing a boat magazine thought I was good at taking pictures of old buildings in Coney Island.
Wow.
So try to connect the dots and have it make sense. Okay? You're asking me what's coming up next? I don't know, but I can't wait.
The world was your oyster.
It was.
So in terms of, say, basement level brass tacks, how many days a month average are you booking to make you and your wife and your kids feel comfortable? And how many days does it take to, be a little nervous, and maybe that's a lean month?
It's a hard question to answer because when my workload was predominantly editorial, I said, an average is 500. It could be as low as 250 if it was one fast shot, And it's nice if you could double up a couple of assignments in one day, which I was able to do on several occasions, and that makes it worth it. So editorial is a little bit thinner. If I was doing corporate work, it pays a lot more. If it was advertising, oh, baby, it's great. Talking about one thing leading to another. I photograph boats. This same agent in Chicago called me up again. He goes, hey, I got an interesting gig for you. He goes, you familiar with Merit Cigarettes? Because they have a sea captain campaign. And since you photograph rowing boats, they think you could photograph models dressed up as sea captains smoking cigarettes. And that was several $1,000s a day with unlimited budgets. And we flew around the planet. When you get a call from Amex, and this is pre-internet, and was saying, "Is this Mr. Weitz? Yeah. What is your address? What is your grandmother's maiden name? Okay. Are you aware that you put $17,000 on your card yesterday, which is not normal for you?" I go, "Yeah, I had to rent a train and 2 tugboats." So okay, we're just checking. I go, "Yeah, just keep it going. It's good." So you'd have crazy stuff like that. But this is one thing led to another. So because I was photographing boats for nothing, I was photographing, Merit cigarette campaigns. Which was extremely lucrative.
Right.
Well, and how many of these jobs, or what percentage would you say, are you actually interested in? I mean, you have a love for photography, but you got to pay the bills.
I could say I'm fortunate. There were very few assignments that I did not, quote unquote, enjoy on some base level. Some of them were kind of boring, but I just went out and took pictures. That's really what I'm going out with the camera. I mean, really, what could be wrong with that? So I would just make the best of all situations. Offhand, I really can't think of any assignment that was just bad, other than from like weather or something like that.
So what kind of weather issues did you run into, especially with the boating stuff?
Oh, God. I was once off Cape Ann in a squall, and it was a 70-foot boat. And these are all seasoned fishermen, and they're out up on the top decks fishing, and they're down below cooking lamb, and the boat is slamming back and forth. And I lost my cookies. There was nothing left in me. So bad weather would be about the worst thing, especially with boating. And I remember another time we were down in Martinique doing an article for Esquire on cruising the Caribbean. It was a rough life. And they chartered us a 32-foot boat that took us around for a week, and we had a squall. And I remember holding on for dear life while the boat was literally on its side. And at one point, the captain was cooking dinner, and I'm watching this chicken flying across the salon. The bonus of the whole thing is that I did have a camera with me, and I was able to grab a few frames of the boat from the wheel looking forward with squall clouds in front of it. It looks really nasty, and the mast almost touching the water. The boat is going over on its side.
Wow.
And that picture was used full page in Esquire magazine with an essay on the joy of sailing by Senator Ted Kennedy.
Huh.
Amazing.
Wow.
Now, I want to transition that to podcast. You got to interview people. Some people are a little harder to pull a story out of. I mean, look, you get somebody on, and what if it's hard to pull words out of them? What if it's hard to get the story?
Oh, I'm not as worried about that as not really understanding the subject as well. I have to laugh. We recently found out that a podcast we did on hip hop has been incorporated into the curriculum at NYU.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. But I'm also thinking to myself at the same time, that episode terrified me because I know nothing about hip hop. Right? And thank goodness Jason was like, okay, he was just bubbling over. He just took over the seat, which was fine by me. See, that's where collaboration comes in handy, okay? Rather than sitting there babbling like a fool, just let everybody else do the talking. And you still end up getting credit for it. So it worked out fine. But that was a good example where I was really nervous. I mean, if you listen to that assignment, I don't say much. I introduce everybody and I just shut up. I'm sipping coffee. That's about it. There have been some people that have been kind of difficult to get to talk with, but that would be their basic ways of being. Some people just aren't talkers. One person I'm really glad we never had on the show was Bruce Davidson. Because I've seen him, and God bless him, he's an amazing photographer, really amazing. But if you've ever seen him, he does not like talking. He's a very shy person. He gives you very short answers. And I could see that being difficult having him on the show. As amazing as he is and as much there is to talk about, it would be laborious.
But I take it you're not going to reveal on air right now which episodes, just broke you?
Are there episodes that, I really got nothing from? Absolutely. I don't remember which ones they are. But there have been episodes where, I signed off and I go, thank God that's over. What's for lunch?
Right.
No, seriously. And some of them were even, good people, but I really, I either wasn't interested as much. It wasn't a subject that lit me up that much, even though I might have been fine on air. Or just not really excited about, the photographer themselves. And I think there's one thing we were going to be touching on a little bit here was, what do you do with the photographer whose work you truly don't like and upsets you?
I was just going to bring that up.
Go for it.
That crazy episode we did at the Depth of Field conference where we got the opportunity to interview Bruce Gilden, and I was prepping for it, and Allan, you were like, oh my God, I can't stand his work.
I can't look at his books, his photographs. I go 3 or 4 pages, I got to put them away. It's too literally in your face. It's very uncomfortable.
But the Brooklyn in you came out, and you all of a sudden are chatting with him like two old Brooklyn bros.
Yeah, let's take a listen.
As I said earlier, right up front, that your pictures troubled me in many ways. A lot of your photographs. I watched several of the interviews on YouTube, and I listened to you, and now having understand where you're coming from, and the fact that you come from Brooklyn, and that says a lot too, right there. I now have an appreciation of what you're doing, and I'm not going to get the shakes or get crazy when I look at the pictures.
But I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Is that necessary? It's a visual thing. To me, when I look at something, I don't ask if the person is this or that, or a woman or a man, or 80 or 20. I like it or I don't, okay? I don't, when you start giving me all your history, anyone can make up their own history. I don't, okay? But, just because you said it, does that make it true? I mean,
but whatever you said clicked with me and enabled me to process your photographs the way they should be processed.
Okay. It works for you.
Whatever that's worth.
It provides context.
Yeah, that's it. And by the way, we want to talk about irony. Here we're doing an audio podcast on a visual subject. So here we are. We're talking about photographs. At the end of the day, it's all we're doing. We're not looking at them.
No, I agree with you. And that's why, what I'll say in the lecture here is that I hope people look at my picture and make a little story up, because that's what I do. The stories,
Gotcha.
I see that guy. Like there's one Lefty Louie, guy wearing a sharkskin suit. He looks like he's in the 80s. And he's walking like from 1952 with a white tie. He's just like walked out of some film noir. And that's it. Film noir, I'm done.
So great.
Thank you.
Bruce Gilden, thank you for joining us. Have a great lecture.
Thank you. Ooh. How about a great lunch?
Yes.
Well, you wore me out, Allan.
Oh.
And then there's that laugh. Allan, we've got to keep that laugh in a can and throw it in whenever the podcast gets slow.
All right, let me write this down. Okay. Patent canned laugh. Get on.
Yeah, residuals.
Okay,
right?
that's going to be for next Monday, my project. Okay, yes. So that's what I'm going to be doing after the show. I'm going to basically trying to sell my laugh.
Good work on Bruce Gilden.
How did you wear Gilden out? I mean,
I don't know.
It's a
It was an
skill.
interesting thing. I don't know. I was an interesting reaction to him that I wore. But, maybe he felt my angst up front. I don't know. But it was a good interview.
He was such a different person to us at that moment than what we all were expecting.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he showed up like a half an hour early.
Yeah.
Which we weren't even set up yet. So it was like, whoa.
he wanted to put you on ice.
No, he didn't. He was incredibly generous, and
He has a reputation that doesn't comport with his actual demeanor when he's dealing with.
at least not on that day.
Well, on the street, he's got to be a bulldog.
I mean, you come in expecting one person and you get another person.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to throw you for a loop, especially when you're trying to interview somebody and you kind of go in and look at Gilden. He's got such a body of work, such a reputation, as you said, Mike. But when the person doesn't meet, the reputation that precedes them, that's a left turn.
It is, yeah.
Allan, it's been great sitting down with you and getting to hear more about your career. What do you have in store for the immediate future?
I'm really, really happy right now that I go out with cameras and I'm photographing the exact kind of work that I want to do for myself. In the past 2 years, I've been getting a lot more shows going on. My work is in a lot of shows. It's in about 4 of them right now. two in Hartford, one in Minneapolis, and another up in Vermont, I think. I'm doing more of that, which is just satisfaction. I'm just satisfying myself. But my big timekeeper right now is I'm doing a book on Kodachrome. I'm writing a book on the history of Kodachrome, which is a film that basically is the film that I used back in the day. It's got an amazing story. The name of the book is It Started with Two Guys Named Leo, the story of Kodachrome. And it's true. It was two guys named Leo back in 1915. They were musicians who liked photography, and they went to see a movie that was in this new picture something color that was supposed to be gorgeous color. And it's so they decided somebody's got to make a better color film. And 20 years later, they introduced Kodachrome, which for 74 years was and remains the best color film ever made. And it's got great anecdotes to it. There's a lot of great stories associated with Kodachrome.
It's a great song about it.
A great song. There's a state park named after it. Now, the idea of Kodachrome was to make better movies. Only one movie was ever made in Kodachrome because it was too contrasty and difficult to duplicate. And the movie was Lawrence of Arabia. It's 65 millimeter Kodachrome, all right? The color scenes in The Wizard of Oz were Kodachrome. That was the first use of it, all right? A little bit in Cinderella. And the Zabruta film, the 8 millimeter film of Kennedy's assassination is Kodachrome. So it really never made it as a movie film, but as far as a still film, I mean, it was nothing like it. But I have advertising going back to 1936. I have all kinds of promo pieces, a lot of great information about it, a lot of fun products, like, thermos bottles with Kodachrome on it. I have a canister of Kodachrome 25. That's a 25 gig thumb drive. It's got a little port coming out of the top of it. So it's kind of funny to have a roll of Kodachrome that I back up digital images on. Anyway, so that's my big thing right now. And I hope to have the book out within the year. I'm going to start shopping it around soon. I'm waiting for a few more pieces to come in to photograph for it. And then I'm going to be busy on that. So, and I expect to be back as a guest when that book comes out. I promise you a good show.
Does it go into the discontinuation of Kodachrome?
Oh, yeah. I have a whole thing about the last days of it. Absolutely. In fact, it went on for about almost another 2 weeks because they had so much film coming in. There was supposed to be, I think, I forget the December cutoff date, December 29th or something like that. It was supposed to be a cutoff date. But they were still getting thousands of rolls of film coming in every day. So what they did was they decided, we're just going to keep developing film until we run out of chemistry. And I think they went through January 9th. And then that was it. That was the end of it. Now, you can still get Kodachrome developed, but only the black and white part of it. So who cares?
Hold on. So explain this to me.
Okay. Kodachrome. Now, the beauty of Kodachrome, the reason why Kodachrome is so gorgeous and is reason why it is so stable and uniform compared to any of the Ektachrome, Fujichrome, any of the other chromes. And they're all good films, but they lack a true color. And one of the reasons why is that Kodachrome is a black and white film with different layers, and the color is added in during processing so that you don't have to worry about storage times, how old is it, was it hit by heat or cold, and it was just perfect, which is why I have Kodachromes taken during World War II that are stunning,
Right.
but I have Ektachromes and Fujichromes that I shot 40 years ago that are turning green.
Where does the data reside, the color data?
It's in a black and white layer. It's basically sort of think of a sponge that absorbs unique colors. And when they develop it, the dyes are put in, and specific layers absorb specific dyes.
Gotcha.
And are blocked from blending together.
Was it purposely designed to last because they knew that black and white?
No. As a matter of fact, it wasn't even an issue. Longevity was not an issue for the longest time. And it wasn't until not too long ago that people started realizing that, hey, this stuff fades. Now, Kodachromes, it turns out, didn't fade, but they didn't want to talk about that because it would endanger sales of Ektachrome, which was where they made their money. Because the problem with Kodachrome is that there were only at the top, something like 6 labs in the world that developed it. It was that complex. Even though it was designed in a bathtub in an apartment on the Upper West Side, you needed unique labs to be able to carry it out ultimately. And the only ray of sunshine, and the reason why that I stuck with it for so long, is that back in the late 90s, New York Film Works opened up on 22nd and 5th Avenue, and it was a Kodachrome lab You could drop off Kodachrome at 5 p.m. and pick it up at 8 the next morning. Or if you had to, you could pick it or drop it off in the morning and have it in 6 hours if you wanted to pay twice the price. That was priceless because there were times I'd have to wait days to get work back.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Now, the weak spot of Kodachrome, all right, and it's another reason why it didn't really work for the movies, is that even though it is the most light, fast film, it'll start fading within an hour and 20 minutes of being projected. Whereas all the Ektochromes and Fujichromes last way longer. So for projection purposes, and that's the way most slides are viewed, Kodachrome is not the choice.
Interesting.
So it's a funny film. It's the most permanent film there is as far as color. Nothing will beat it. They figured that they'll last 200 years under the right conditions.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Wow.
But again, this is stuff that all came up over time that it wasn't a consideration up front. They were just trying to sell stuff, trying to sell film.
Well, we can't wait to talk with you more about this when your book comes out, Allan.
It makes two of us. That means the book came out.
But for now, maybe we should pass the mic back to you so you can do your thank yous.
Yeah. I think it's about a good time for that. Anyway, this has been a real blast. It's been fun. Okay. Obviously, there's apprehension, but it's a giggle. It's all fun. And for the final time, I would like to say thank you so much. Let me begin by saying that I could not have pulled this show off without the talents of my original co-pilots, John Harris, the initiator and original producer and co-host of this podcast, and Jason Tables, who is our original sound engineer and associate producer. More recently and currently, Jill Waterman and Mike Weinstein have been doing an amazing job continuing the process with the same sense of dedication and professionalism. It's been a trip and an amazing one at that. I could not be more grateful to each of you. And it's been an honor and a privilege, really, to collaborate on so many terrific episodes together. Entertainment and information aside, it's comforting to know that this show really has made a difference in the lives of some of our listeners, maybe many of our listeners. I know one listener who told me that our podcast helped him through a really rough period in his life. Listening to the show relit a spark deep down inside, which in turn caused him to pick up his camera after years of letting it sit idle. And taking photographs has helped him gain his emotional footing once again. Now, I'm the last person you should ever come to for sensible advice, but it's good to know that in this instance, I actually made a little difference in this world, at least for one person, and that's just amazingly rewarding. And then there are some of our other longtime listeners, and I can't get to them all, unfortunately, but names that immediately come to mind are Chris Ortiz. Chris has always wanted to earn at least part of his income shooting concerts, and son of a gun, that's exactly what he's been doing, and he's doing it really, really well. Chris, keep it up. And then we have my Coney Island people, Orlando Mendez, AJ Bernstein, Norman Blake, you lunatic. You're all nuts, and I love you for it. John Bruning. If you want to read some really, really fine World War II era history books, check out anything by John R. Bruning. And John, keep good care of that cute little kitten you got there. Michael Young, a photographer from the Bronx who truly sees the light and who's killing it. Keep it going, my friend. Your work is absolutely awesome. And lest I forget, there's a bunch of camera hamper UPS delivery guys who tune into the show while making their rounds in Midtown Manhattan. A few of you once stopped by our booth at one of the trade shows when you saw our banner, and you told us that there's a bunch of you guys who just listen to the show whenever possible. You just love all the episodes and you chat amongst yourselves. That's great to know that it helps your work day. And there's so many more names, but we're going to have to feed the parking meters again, and I'm really out of quarters. So that said, on behalf of Jill, Mike, and everybody else who signs off on this show, I would like to say a Tusen Takks. That's Norwegian for 1,000 thanks to each of you for tuning in over the past decade. Having your ear, and more importantly, your trust, has been an honor and an enormous privilege. I've been taking photographs for over 55 years, and this show has given me an opportunity to take what I've learned over this time as a working photographer and, along with our guests, channel this information into food for thought with a joke or two along the way whenever possible. Now, if that's not a cool way to spend one's day, I don't know what is. If you'd like to follow my ongoing projects, and I am still very, very busy as a photographer, I can be found on Instagram at Allan Weitz. Remember, ALLAN, put that extra L in there. And my website, which is allanweitz.com. Reach out. I'd love to continue the conversation with each of you and have you on board. For now, until we cross paths once again, may God bless each and every one of you. Be well, and as always, thank you oh so much for tuning in today. Ba-da-pum.
Thanks to NVIDIA for sponsoring this week's episode.